Hi, my name is Kimberly Wise. Welcome to my YouTube channel. I am talking today about 5 tips for being a Tubie mama. Now, if you don't have a tube-fed child, this may not pertain to you at all, but even if you're interested in learning about it, I would recommend that you stick around and just hear a few tips. So when my son Redmond was born 2 years ago, we had a surprise diagnosis of Down syndrome, and that came with a lot of medical challenges. So he was on something called ECMO, which is a last resort life support, for 6 days. He was also on a ventilator and in a medically induced coma for around 2 weeks. And so during the time that he should have been learning how to eat, he was totally unable to do that. And it's something that really comes naturally to most babies, one of the first things that they do instinctually. And he did not have the opportunity to learn that or to follow those instincts. So after he was out of the coma and everything was going a lot better, we were trying to teach him to eat, and it just wasn't going so well. The ventilator had pushed up the palate in his palate in his mouth at the top, and so it was misshapen. And then he also had a lip tie here that we didn't know about, but it made it very difficult for him to get the proper seal so that he could suck, swallow, breathe. So we would try, but the milk would just dribble out the side of his mouth, and he would try really hard. He just couldn't do it. So we started with something called an NG tube, which went up his nose and down in his esophagus, down into his stomach, and then it was like taped to the side of his face here, and then it was a long tube, and we would hook up a feeding tube to it, and it would just go down that way right into his stomach. And then after we did that for a while, and it wasn't getting any better, then we changed to something called a GTube, which is just a little button that is surgically implanted into his stomach. And instead of having that tube, we just are able to attach a feeding tube right to his stomach, and then the food goes directly in. During those first few months of his life, everything was just really hard with the feeding. Since we didn't know that he couldn't take a bottle, we would spend a lot of time trying to get him to take a bottle, and then we would tube feed the rest of it. So it was like 8 times a day. We would feed him every 3 hours, and it would take about 90 minutes just to feed him. And then, I would have 90 minutes before the next feeding to sleep or eat or take a shower, whatever it was that I was able to do. And so our life got a lot easier as he got older and didn't need to eat as often. And as he got the G-tube, it really made things a lot easier. He's 2 now, and he is still needing to be tube fed. And we don't really understand why he's able to chew and swallow. He doesn't aspirate or anything like that, but he just doesn't do it. And so he's had a lot of other medical issues that have prevented us from being able to really hit that hard. So that's something that we're hoping to do soon. But in the meantime, I have come up with a few tips for other Tubie moms that may be helpful for you. So I want to tell you that number 1, the feeding tube is not your enemy. When we came home from the NICU with him in that feeding tube, it was my number 1 priority to get that thing out. I thought we'd sit in the chair, I would teach him how to nurse, and everything would be fine. He never was able to nurse, and that was really, really hard on me. It's still hard when I think about it too much. But we had the feeding tube, and so I remember when our home health nurse came to visit me for the first time, she said, "Hey, I don't want you to resent this. I don't want you to despise it, because babies need good nutrition. This is a time of exponential growth in their bodies and especially in their brains. And if they don't have the proper dietary fat and calories and all that nutrition, then they're not set up for success right from the beginning." And so the thing you need to remember, whether it's breast, bottle, or tube, fed is best. And so I would really encourage you that we wasted a lot of time despising that tube, when I wish we could have just felt grateful for it, that we had a way to feed him and get him nourished. Number 2, accept the help you're offered. Or if you're not offered help, you need to ask for it. Yes, in America, we like to be independent and do things ourselves, capable and strong, and you are. You absolutely are. But This is more than any one person or couple should handle on their own. So I would really recommend to you that if someone offers to help you, that you let them help. And if they don't offer, that you ask. We had help from my mother-in-law and our babysitter, and then also my husband. And I'm going to tell you, it was hard at the beginning to accept help. And I had a hard time because I didn't necessarily trust other people to do it. And I had to remind myself that I was making mistakes and learning from them, and I had to let them make mistakes and learn from them as well. And I would do everything I knew to do to teach other people how to do it. I had a step-by-step, very specific, laminated instruction sheet that, I mean, it told every little possible thing, and I wrote it as I did it so I wouldn't forget, like clamp the tube, unclamp the tube, open the medicine port, close the medicine port, unclamp the tube, you know, I mean, really, really specific, but that helped them so that they were able to help me, and we figured it out together. So I really want to recommend to you that you allow other people to help. And in our case, what we found was these older teenage girls that were willing to come and help babysit were actually great at it as once I trained them how to do it, because they were old enough to understand instructions and they were young enough not to be afraid. So I just encourage you that there are people available who are willing to help most of the time. And you might be pleasantly surprised if you give it a try. Number 3, don't be too hard on yourself. I can't tell you how many times I have forgotten to unclamp the extension tube and the pump is going and starts beeping at me because there's no flow. Or even worse, the medicine port pops open instead of that, and then the food just goes onto the floor. Or when we were doing overnight feeds, I mean, how many times did I feed that bed? So, you know, you're tired, you're overwhelmed, you're dealing with a lot of stuff, you're not going to get it right every time. Don't be too hard on yourself. And the other thing is, if you need to postpone a feeding or even skip a feeding so that you can get some sleep, or that your family can go and do something that they need to do, unless your child has a medical reason why that can't happen, then I would just recommend that you relax a little bit and allow yourself that freedom. We don't all eat on a schedule. Our other kids don't eat on a schedule. And I mean, you know, somewhat, but not like a crazy schedule. And so you can relax a little bit. Do the best you can. But if it's not working that day, take a deep breath, go with the flow, and get yourself back on schedule the next day. So, you know, as long as you don't have any medical issues that would prevent you from doing that, I just recommend that you relax a little bit, give yourself some grace. In the long run, it's probably going to be okay. And I wish that I had taken that advice when I was dealing with all this early on stuff, and I never even thought to miss a feeding, and I was so tired. Number 4, join a support group, and highly likely it's going to be an online support group for you. I know that none of us feel like we really want to talk about this stuff any more than what we already are, because we're dealing with it all day, every day. But I've learned a lot in my support groups. Just issues like how to manage doctors who don't understand, dietary issues, dietitians, reflux, vomiting, all kinds of things like that I've learned how to deal with through these online support groups. And you're probably going to see some pretty gross stuff, like people taking pictures of infected sites and things like that. Well, that's probably not going to help you. So you're just going to scroll right past that stuff and not get involved in it, and not, you know, get all worked up about that, and look for the things that help you. Seriously, you have to have some self-discipline in those groups to keep moving past the stuff that's not helpful to you. And then after you have some time under your belt and you've maybe gotten better at it and you want to help people who are having, you know, really strange situations, go for it. But in the early days, just go right past that stuff. Okay, number 5, gratitude. I think this is going to be one of the most important ones for all of us. When we have children with special needs and then we're trying to deal with all the other stuff of life, we can get really full of self-pity. At least I know I can. And that doesn't help anybody. And it sure doesn't help you have the energy to keep going and be a good mom or dad, grandma, grandpa. It's not helpful. And so I really want to encourage you to focus on what you do have. You have this baby to hold. There might have been a time in your life, your baby's life, as well as my baby's life, where you weren't sure if they would even live. And so, hey, you have a baby that you're getting to hold. This child is probably smiling at you and or will be soon, and there's a lot of good stuff here. You probably have a roof over your head. What can you think of to be thankful for? And I tell you what, when I get in a really super funk where I can't get out of it, what helps me is I've gone and sat in the lobby of a children's hospital for 15 to 20 minutes and just watched other people go by with their kids. And I'll tell you what, that'll make you grateful in a heartbeat, because more than likely there are kids that are in a lot worse situation than yours, and it will restore some perspective. So lastly, you have got to find the humor in this situation. So if you're out in public and somebody is very rude and says to you, like, you know, aren't you going to feed your baby or your child? You just smile at them and say something like, Mom, we don't feed this one. Keep a straight face. Don't even let on that you're joking, and walk away. Then you can laugh for the rest of the day about it. It's none of their business what you're doing. They don't need an explanation. If you have the energy to explain, go for it. If you don't worry about it. And if that friend or your sister who has, 10 kids says to you, hey, I can get that baby eating, you say, oh, great, I really could use some help. And you hand that child over and you hand over a bottle, go for it. Not if they're aspirating, but, in other situations, go for it. And after she's been trying for 90 minutes to feed this baby and only 1 ounce has gone from the bottle, and she hands the baby back to you and says, oh, you'd be very gracious, but when you get alone that night, you laugh just as hard as you want to, because you're not quite as dumb as they think you are. Okay, lastly, our life is not something that other people can easily understand. Unless you've been the one tube feeding your child and spending countless hours every single day trying to get your baby to eat, other people just aren't going to understand. So we have to have some grace for them. But I want to encourage you that I see you. And you are doing an awesome job. Don't give up. You've got this. You are a lion-hearted mama. And you are becoming a warrior for your child. And your child is alive because of all the things you're doing to help. So carry on and know that I see you.